recording me so I can put it on my channel and stuff. Okay, so earlier I did an explanation of the Underground Man and Notes from Underground, and like I said, it's kind of the entry point into his greater works. But I mean, he has a whole life before that. So I'll actually go over. I'm not going to go through his whole life, but I'm going to talk about like why should we study Dostoevsky? Why is he relevant? Why are we still, in a way, our culture, like deep down, is still at the point, or no, we're down one of the roads, but the crossroads to like other directions really hinges on in the mid 1800s, because our culture still accepts a lot of the premises that he was warning about, like rationalism, scientism, and stuff. Nothing wrong with rationality or science, but to make them completely all-encompassing, something's not real unless it has, what's your peer-reviewed study? Kind of thing, or that, like science as the only way to tell what's real. It's like, okay, the part of nature that is accessible by science is here, here's nature, here's all of reality, all right? So we haven't really learned that. So anyway, why should we study? So, by the way, has anyone read any of them? Okay. Any titles? Notes from Underground. Yeah.
You read
Brother's Kid.
Awesome.
Yeah. Took me 4 times to get through Brother's Kid. Both because like it's a tough book and I wasn't in the right place for it. Yeah. Anyway, in the mid 1800s, the political philosophy in Russia, it was censored. All right, the Tsar, they didn't want any stuff, and they were kind of oafish with their censorship. So even if you were defending the government or the status quo, they'd be like, this is politics. So they would oust it and stuff. So that's why a lot of the Russian novels are much more than just a story. All right, they encompass whole metaphysics. It's the only way that they were able to really talk about these ideas, and as well as in literary circles. Like, we're talking about literature. Wink, wink. All right? What in Eastern Europe or in Western Europe they would have just spoken openly in salons and stuff like that. And the big issue or one of the constant issues in Russia was should we import the Enlightenment from Europe or not? Now, a lot of people, of course. But then Dostoevsky, he actually learned, wait a minute, that might not be completely a good idea. The Enlightenment might not be as enlightening as you think. And so we'll get to that a bit. But what he does in his writing is he captures both the causes and some of the effects of the shift from capital R Romanticism to naturalism. All right, so the Romantic movement, which is really a shift from presenting and seeing man as capable of the highest, most transcendent values. All right, the heroic in man, the Christ-likeness man, the Christ-like man will have access to all of these higher transcendent values. All right, that was the role that the Romantics saw in the physical world and in poetry itself. It's supposed to call us upward. Or even call us downward to like experience despair and stuff. The shift from that to the naturalists also called the realists, was okay. Well, let's just focus on how things, instead of focusing on what things ought to be, let's focus on how things really are. Let's do like Dickens. Let's do snapshots of the lower class. Although he's not completely a naturalist or a realist. And it was a lot more focus on like, let's just get people bread and shelter and stuff. So it really did go along with it, because if you cut off all the higher values of humanity, then what's left, right? Food, shelter, sex, like that's it. And so that was their goal with that. So he sees this thing that Nietzsche would call the death of God, this lack of belief in anything objective and transcendent. Dostoevsky sees it as primarily played out in the realm of aesthetics, not in the realm of politics, not in the realm of philosophy, although, it's in those things, but because it's such a shift in how we see the world, transcendent values in God and everything exists, to, you know what, we're just here, we're physical, we're just animals, so let's that's going to produce different types of art, that's going to produce different types of seeing the world, and then later on politics. Now because he does articulate this shift without just simply like, I'm just going to keep writing capital R romance novels, romantic hero stories, and readers can suck it. Like, no, he's part of the realist school, but he is able to capture how life really is while still showing, wait a minute, there's real values. Orthodoxy and Christianity are real. And which that actually becomes his answer to a lot of the issues of his day. It's because he is able to capture this giant, like, nihilistic shift in values. I think he's the most important writer since Shakespeare, because he's picking up the baton that was put down by Shakespeare. Shakespeare saw that the Protestant Reformation is going to lead to a whole a destruction of the foundation of understanding even reality. That's why Hamlet can't do anything, because he said, well, I can't be sure what's real or not. And so he saw that as well as like the destruction of like things like honor and stuff. Honor is only a way to get you killed. This conception that really wouldn't be cultural until maybe the First World War. Like, oh yeah, let's get rid of all those values that just get us killed and stuff. Shakespeare saw it coming. Dostoevsky shows this monumental shift. Anyway, so now his goal as a young guy, he wanted to help the Russian serfs, all right, because they were still under the serfdom feudalism system. So even though he himself wasn't a socialist, he joined a socialist printing circle to try to spread some of these ideas with the hope of liberating some of the serfs. But they got caught, so he got sent to Siberia for 4 years. And in Siberia, the ideas that the literary circles he had been in, the upper class intelligentsia who were like, oh, we're too smart to believe in God anymore, but his ideals were good, so let's try to achieve them through earthly means, through social organization kind of stuff. Socialism can do what Jesus wanted to do anyway, but by the way, he was probably a socialist himself. He was not. But it seemed superficially like Dostoevsky's goals as a Christian lined up with these guys. But in prison, he would find out that a lot of their ideas were flat out wrong. That work, physical labor was not an oppressive thing. Like, no, it actually gives you purpose. Right? The lower classes did not resent the upper classes. They actually liked the social hierarchy. The lower ones honored the Tsar. Also, he found that, what was it? Anyway, so most importantly, he found that it's actually, rather than like the enlightened upper class teaching the lower classes how to be reasonable and how to live good lives and stuff like that, it should actually be the lower classes, the peasants in Russia, with what he saw as like their natural Orthodox faith, should be teaching the upper classes how to be good and how to be resilient, because one of the big other things that he will use in his later novels was also that crime is not simply a result of circumstance. No, there's something, people will know that they are doing a crime, and they will take pleasure in doing the worst things you can imagine. All right, so now let's think about it. A lot of these ideas, we hear them all the time still, like, oh, well, crime is only a result of oppression. All right, if we stop the oppression, people will stop committing crime and stuff. So let's get rid of the police and kind of, we have seen all that happen. Or the idea that, oh, work is bad. You should limit how many hours a day you work, or it's necessarily oppressive, the upper oppressing the lower, rather than like, no, it gives me private purpose to do something good with my hands. So anyway, a lot of these, we hear them, the same ideas that he was combating. And so again, like, that's enough for me to be like, okay, this guy is relevant still because we haven't learned his lessons. So he learned it, and most important, he learned that the answer to the ideologies of like, oh, let's liberate the people, that's orthodoxy, not atheist socialism. And so he spent the rest of his life, eventually more and more virulently. At first, when he gets out of prison, he gives the benefit of the doubt. Okay, I know you want to help people, but I've seen it, kid. The best way to help people is not through that socialism. And then eventually he stopped giving the benefit of the doubt. He's like, okay, wait, you think those ideas? Guess what? You are driven by fear and viciousness. And he goes after it in some of these characters. And that's actually, and earlier when I was talking about Notes from Underground, it's the first in his tactic of, rather than accepting the premise that, reality equals logical argument, all right, which there's certainly a place for that, but and this is actually something that tuned me into, one of the hearts of Orthodoxy was the appreciation for mysticism. The reality of the faith is not found in the apologetics of the faith. The apologetics of the faith are like the signs outside the building. They are not the substance of the building, so to speak. And so, I'm a big fan of the scholastics, but when you're done arguing God's reality, what do you get? Okay, well then, how do you worship then? Because he was coming from that background, he doesn't meet these ideas with an argument. He meets them with a full expression of a human being trying to live them out. That's what Notes from Underground argue. That's one interpretation of Notes from Underground. Is a guy filled with contradictions because the ideology, the rationalist ideology that he's trying to live out, trying to cork his selfless Christianity, because that's just passe and stuff. That's not going to make me cool. This new ideology is going to make me cool. It doesn't work, and he actually finds out that his ideas are really vicious and stuff. That he actually takes pleasure in harming people out of this resentful, like, my ideas it's not working the way it's supposed to. So now I keep almost saying Shakespeare, but Dostoevsky he uses the same tactic in his later novels. So especially the one right afterwards, Crime and Punishment. That's usually the one I recommend people start with when they read Dostoevsky. Notes from Underground, it is his shortest major work, but man, is it obscure. And so, especially if we don't know like the ideas he's responding to at the time and stuff, it's like, man, does he think this or not? No, but he does have sympathy for the characters, so there's a lot we can relate to. Crime and Punishment. It's about a guy who is trying to accept, on the conscious level, he tells himself, I'm going to be a utilitarian, rationalist, atheist. And so from a utilitarian way of thinking, greatest good for the most people, he decides to prove that the old moralities of Christianity and stuff are useless by killing a pawnbroker, basically. He kills this woman that will then release all the debt around her and stuff, and it'll be good for society, right? And he does it, and he discovers that I do not feel like I benefited humanity, and he actually becomes very neurotic. He becomes very obsessed. He becomes very fearful, and the rest of the book, it takes the form of kind of an inverted crime detective novel. Now, there is a detective. There is a detective trying to find him and trying to figure out, okay, who did this and what was his motives and stuff. And he knows it's Raskolnikov, but he wants him to admit it. But the detective story takes the form of Raskolnikov himself investigating and discovering his own true motives. It was not utilitarian, like, let me help society by killing this woman. No, it was egotism. He wanted to prove that he was a Napoleon figure. All right, which, by the way, if you have to prove it, you're not. All right, so it's a self-defeating process. Again, the whole book is this guy trying to live out consistently this new ideology. But then, at the same time, he's having to battle his own Christianity. His family shows up, and he'll give money to people here and there, to try to stop them from needing to do bad things, or he'll defend, and he learns that, wow, I'm just as bad as this rich guy trying to marry my sister, and her sacrificing herself for him is the same thing as that woman dying because I needed to make myself bigger. And he learns through all these figures that, wow, my motives were much deeper and darker than I expected. And again, similar to Notes from Underground, it's a Christian prostitute who redeems the story. Sonia Marmeladov is one of Dostoevsky's greatest characters, because she is in such a terrible position, but she's the moral center of the book. I mean, whenever people, so my book is, it would be rated R. It has a couple of salty words in there because not all my characters treat language well. It's for sale, by the way. But whenever people are like, oh, well, Christian books should talk about like nice things and stuff. One of the best Christian books that I've ever read is about a murderer who falls in love with a prostitute. So that's just kind of my like, wow, this guy really looked into life. That's technically why he's part of the realist school. But he nonetheless is able to show like, hey, the transcendent values and the morality that this guy is trying to push against, he can push, but it won't break. Human psychology does not work with these limited provincial ideologies. But it's Sonia's orthodoxy that actually can give him a full rest from his internal punishment. Crime and punishment does not refer to doing a crime and going to prison. Going to prison actually relieves him of his internal punishment. All right, spoiler alert. All right, but actually it's not, because I mean, working out. Okay, how does he show that and stuff? So anyway, the Notes from Underground, it really does open up this way of, let me show the bad guy who doesn't know he's a bad guy, maybe discovering that he's the bad guy. And then he continues to do that through the devils, also known as the possessed, these guys who want to take over Russia to establish socialism, as well as this like upper class guy, Stafardin, who, because he thinks he's lost all faith and all transcendent values, he just has to do more and more terrible things just to feel anything and stuff. So, and then of course there's Brothers Karamazov, where Ivan, Alyosha's brother, is this super smart guy, but eventually he either goes mad or is possessed. It's the same thing to Dostoevsky. But that's his big discovery, was that, hey, our physicality often is our physical situation is often related to our psychological makeup, and our psychology often involves what ideas, what principles, what ideologies do we think we are pursuing, and all that in his later novels shows itself in Notes from Underground. We see the seed and the door to a lot of his other works. So yeah, I know I just went through like a ton. Do you guys have any thoughts, questions?
What was his role in the church? I mean, was he a faithful churchgoer, or was he one of the precepts and wrote about them, or was he an active?
He grew up Orthodox, and thank goodness he never left or he never renounced Orthodoxy. And he actually his biographer Joseph Frank, he links that with his romanticism, the idea that there is transcendent value all over the place. It's a sacramental view of reality. And so, but he wasn't as faithful a churchgoer during like his younger years and stuff. But then eventually he will get really close to certain fathers, and actually I believe he spent some time. I don't know if it's Mount Athos, but he spent some time in a monastery, and he very much, his later works have outstanding priest characters who often are the redeemers of the book. Zosima, yeah. Yes, yeah. I forget the name. I forget his name, but yeah, Father Zosima is definitely based on the head of a monastery. Yeah, and he articulates a lot of that. I mean, but even then, the main and Alyosha, the young protagonist of Brothers K, is his greatest character. It's his answer to all of his previous depictions of ideology. And his conflict is, okay, for you, it would be running from reality to stay in the monastery. You need to go home and learn to love your family. That the greatest novel in the world, that is the primary focus of it. Hey, learn to actually love actual people in your life. That's not easy for him. He has the worst dad ever, all right? And then his brother is like a rabid atheist. And so it's made harder because he's a loving atheist. He loves him. It's like, yeah. But he becomes much more involved in the church later on. Any other? Go for it.
Sure. I took some notes. I wasn't texting, by the way.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. What's the score?
Yeah.
No, some interesting things.
Sure.
Now that we hate Russia, because of the most evil people who ever lived, and we should burn all of those here, I suppose. I just read an article, I can't remember who wrote it, it might have been Peter Hitchens, but he was talking about, we have the whole history wrong of Russia, obviously,
Sure.
as we did. And he was saying that you could divide the Tsars into Slavophiles and Western.
Yeah.
So Peter was a Western guy.
Yeah.
Peter was the one
He made St. Petersburg. It's a manufactured city. Yeah.
And then Catherine's son, can't remember his name, was a Slavophile.
Yeah.
So they thought that, no, we need to emphasize the Russian thing. So I didn't realize that about Dostoevsky because I would think he was kind of more of a Western European.
He actually, no, he was closest to a Slavophile. He actually, and his journal really pushes this after he gets out of prison, was this thing called Pochvenichestvo, which means back to the soil. So his goal was to raise up his people with Enlightenment ideas and like improve education, get rid of serfdom, improve the movement of exchange of ideas and free thought and stuff. However, unlike what he saw in Europe was that, okay, it's other countries coming in and doing that. Like in France, it's like they're trying to spread the Enlightenment and make up for their terrible inflation because of the revolution by like, oh, let's go release these other countries and stuff. And so he thought, no, the best way to raise Russia up is not to import like Westernness, which he saw as anti-Russian, but to have those who are actually educated and thoughtful and yet Orthodox to teach the lower classes, to have it be an internal affair. So he was kind of in the middle, right? But he would definitely become more of a Slavophile, and yeah, it's interesting. Like so far as like what we know is actually real from what we hear, but he probably would have. Okay, I don't know that he would have been okay with like imperialism, like let's go force another Slavic country to be a part of Russia. But he did see Russia as having a messianic future of like he's going to save Europe because of its orthodoxy and stuff. So I think he might have been pulled in a couple directions. Like I don't like what Putin is doing, the way Putin's doing it, but yeah, Ukraine should be part of Russia, or at least like much more openly, because he saw that as like being a unified thing. Like if you're Orthodox and Slavic, you should be behind the Russian kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, he's like, you can make an argument that like he would have been okay with it. I don't know. I don't know that he would have been okay with the method of what's going on. But he was definitely a Slavophile.
But a healthy Slavophile. Healthy.
Yeah, I would say a healthy Slavophile. Yeah. Yeah,
healthy is important.
Yeah,
Not a Slavic.
His persona was healthy.
Yeah, and he
in the midst of chaos.
Yeah, and he hashes out a lot of those ideas in his later books, especially The Devils, where one of the main characters is actually he used to be a Western socialist, but now he's returned and he's now a Slavophile, but he's not you can't be a revolutionary about that. So, because he actually says, like, the moment you do that, the moment you are, the only revolutionaries, whether they believe it or whether they know it or not, revolutionaries are implicitly atheists because you want to throw off authority. And if you're an atheist, you can't be Russian. He actually says in that book, because Russian are Orthodox in honor. So it's I mean, that might be a no true Scotsman fallacy. Oh, like it's not really a Russian. But he would have had a complex view of it. But I think spirit-wise, he wouldn't have liked the idea of force. You can't force what he saw was a messianic religious vision on somebody else. So yeah, so I think smart Slavophile.
Well, I'm thinking, I never heard Shakespeare described in that way. I never thought of him in that way.
Yeah, that took me when we were saying.
But they're both anti-Reformation, you know.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know whether I mean Shakespeare. It's like I've been trying to figure out, and a lot of people have, whether he was actually implicitly Catholic, Protestant, or Anglican. I tend to think more Anglican just out of pragmatism. But yeah. I mean, he understood that if you get rid of if you show that the foundation of what everybody believes is shakable, then you can't set up an unshakable center anymore. And so that he saw the Reformation doing that, and then later on, yeah. So also, it's just Aristotle. So if you don't believe in values, you're not going to experience values. So like when Falstaff in Henry IV Part 1 says, "Oh, look, there's honor," and he's pointing to a dead body. That's what honor gets you. Of course, he's going to say that because he doesn't believe in objective values. Right? He's a wastrel, and so that's one way of interpreting Falstaff. I don't want to throw him out either. Kill Fat Jack, you killed the whole world, he says. But yeah, Shakespeare, I think, consistently is. I don't know that he's anti-Reformation.
I actually misspoke. I meant
No. Okay, yeah. He's even like yes. So I mean, the thing about Shakespeare is everyone can find a piece of him. So the Enlightenment can be like, hey, look, this is what he's doing, and then the Romantics, who are kind of Plato's revenge against Aristotle's Enlightenment, they're like, oh, yeah, the Romantics are Shakespeare and stuff. So yeah, but I mean, what Shakespeare did for plays, I see Dostoevsky is doing with the novelistic form. Yeah.
Well, it's always promoted as Enlightenment, just the term itself. If you're not for that, then you're against Enlightenment. If you're not a humanist, then you're against humans.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's based on the idea that everything before us was dark. It's like, no, read a book. Right? So, yeah. Any other thoughts, questions? Yeah.
Is he highly regarded in Russia?
Dostoevsky? Oh yeah. He's. I mean, even during the communist periods, like, I mean, they would downplay certain stuff. He didn't really believe in God. And I'm still learning about this myself, you guys. But oh yeah, they have Dostoevsky Day on, I believe it's June, the first week of June, because Crime and Punishment opens in the beginning of the summer, and so they actually celebrate it every day or every year. I mean, he was, especially by the end of his life, he was honored as the prophet of Russia. That he had such a vision of not just practical things, but also the deep subterranean things that were going on, that he was like, oh man, if he says it, it's probably right. And so, which, I mean, I most of my time on social media is just quoting him, and I haven't run out of situations to just quote him. And so there's so much to him. But yeah, they definitely regard him as, I mean, he's the guy that all the high schoolers have to read. He's their guy, the way that we have like Steinbeck kind of thing, or what have you. They're, oh yeah, Dostoevsky. You can't talk about like Russian culture without talking about it. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, any time. I mean, my the other families with all the babies, they probably heard more of it than they wanted to. So thank you for the opportunity to let me talk about it, you guys. So yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah.